I do think it's incredible how strong and how you've been able to cope, really. And I put that down to your really early years, childhood experience, but also the relationship that you've got. You're amazingly close.
There are moments in history when even the most guarded walls begin to crack. When the people behind them, no matter how powerful, no matter how protected by protocol and palace press officers, simply cannot contain the truth any longer. For years, Prince William and Princess Catherine built those walls carefully, methodically, brick by brick. Every public appearance was choreographed. Every statement was measured. Every photograph was approved. They were the gold standard of royal composure, the couple that the monarchy pointed to whenever anyone questioned whether the institution still had a future. But something has fundamentally changed. Not gradually, not quietly, but in a way that has left royal watchers, journalists, and ordinary people around the world genuinely stunned. The couple who once perfected the art of controlled silence is now speaking. The couple who once kept the world at a respectful distance is now letting people in. And what is being revealed as those doors slowly swing open is more powerful, more human, and more unexpected than anything the palace's communications team could ever have scripted. This is not a story about royal gossip. This is not a story about scandal for scandal's sake. This is a story about two real human beings who have been shaped, broken, rebuilt, and transformed by events that no title or tiara could protect them from. This is the story of William and Catherine finally saying, out loud and without apology, we cannot hide this anymore. To understand where William and Catherine are today, you have to go back to the moment that cracked everything open. January 2024. Kensington Palace released a statement about Princess Catherine undergoing abdominal surgery. The language was clinical, measured, almost bureaucratic in its precision. The palace described the procedure as successful and indicated that the Princess of Wales would require a period of recovery before returning to public duties. It was a kind of announcement designed to say everything and nothing at the same time, reassuring enough to calm the public, vague enough to protect the palace. And for a brief moment it worked. The world accepted the explanation, wished Catherine a speedy recovery, and waited for her return. But she did not return. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The Princess of Wales, one of the most photographed and recognized women on the planet, had simply vanished from public view. No appearances, no video messages, no casual glimpses through a car window. Nothing. The silence grew louder than any statement the palace could have released. Social media platforms erupted with speculation. Questions turned into theories, and theories turned into something the palace was entirely unprepared to manage: a global obsession with Catherine's whereabouts and well-being. Every corner of the internet seemed to host its own version of what had really happened. The palace's instinct to protect privacy had, for perhaps the first time in this couple's public life, catastrophically backfired. Then came the moment that stopped the world. In March 2024, a video was released. Catherine sat outdoors, calm and composed, but visibly changed. She looked directly into the camera and spoke words that no one in the modern British royal family had spoken in quite this way before. She confirmed her cancer diagnosis. She explained that she was undergoing preventive chemotherapy. And she asked, gently but clearly, for time and privacy to focus on her healing and her family. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of people who had spent weeks speculating and criticizing the palace for its secrecy fell silent. The theories evaporated. What replaced them was something far more powerful: genuine human empathy. People who had never particularly followed the royal family found themselves moved to tears. Not because a princess had cancer, but because a mother of 3 young children had looked into a camera and told the truth about something deeply painful, at a moment when telling the truth was the last thing royal tradition would have encouraged her to do. What is crucial to understand here is what that moment represented beyond the medical fact themselves. For generations, the British royal family has operated under an unwritten but ironclad principle. You do not show weakness, you do not expose vulnerability, and you absolutely do not allow the public to see you as anything other than composed and in control. Catherine's video shattered that principle entirely. Not recklessly, not carelessly, but with extraordinary, deliberate courage. She made a choice that her predecessors almost certainly never would have made, and in doing so, she changed not just her own public image, but the entire emotional contract between the royal family and the people it serves. While Catherine was navigating her diagnosis and the enormously difficult process of chemotherapy, William was doing something that, in the context of royal history, was equally remarkable. He stepped back, completely. The future King of England, the man who carries on his shoulders the weight of an institution that has survived for centuries, simply stopped performing his public duties and chose instead to be a husband and a father. Engagements were cancelled. Appearances were postponed. The royal calendar, that precisely managed instrument of institutional visibility, was rearranged to accommodate something more important, a family in crisis and a wife who needed her partner present, not performing. This decision did not go unnoticed, and for a brief period, it attracted criticism from some corners of the media who had previously questioned William's work ethic and commitment to his royal duties. But those criticisms faded quickly, because the public understood instinctively what William was doing and why. And in understanding it, they saw something they had perhaps never quite seen in him before: a man, not a prince; a husband, not an heir; a father who was choosing school runs and hospital visits over state engagements and carefully managed photo opportunities. William himself spoke about this period with a candor that was deeply uncharacteristic of how he had presented himself publicly throughout most of his adult life. During an engagement in Brazil, he spoke about the extraordinary difficulty of explaining Catherine's illness to their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. He acknowledged that there is no manual for parenting through a cancer diagnosis. He talked about the conversations he and Catherine had made a deliberate effort to have with their children, the choice to communicate more openly rather than rely on the kind of managed, age-appropriate silence that might once have been the palace's default approach. These were not the words of a man reading from a carefully prepared briefing. These were the words of a man who had lived through something frightening and was, for perhaps the first time, allowing the world to understand that. The shift in William's public voice, from guarded and formal to personal and unscripted, did not happen overnight. It happened because of what his family went through, and because of what that experience revealed to him about what truly matters. In January 2025, Catherine released a statement through social media that carried the kind of relief and quiet joy that only people who have genuinely feared the worst can fully appreciate. She confirmed that she was in remission. The world, which had held its breath for months, exhaled. But those who expected the pre-cancer Catherine to simply reappear, polished, poised, immaculate in every detail, were about to discover that something fundamental had shifted. Because Catherine herself was the first to say it. The woman who emerged from her cancer treatment was not the same woman who had entered it, and she was not interested in pretending otherwise. During visits to hospitals and cancer support facilities, Catherine spoke with fellow patients and survivors in a way that broke entirely from royal convention. She did not offer the practiced sympathy and careful encouragement of a royal patron fulfilling her duties. She offered something far more valuable: shared experience and honest recognition of how brutally difficult recovery truly is. She told patients openly that after treatment ends, the world expects you to simply return to normal, to pick up where you left off, to be grateful and well and functional. She acknowledged the gap between that expectation and the complicated, exhausting reality of recovery, the emotional weight that does not lift just because the medical phase is over. These were words spoken not from a script, but from genuine personal experience, and the patients she spoke with recognized that immediately. The lifestyle changes Catherine spoke about publicly were equally revealing. At a community engagement event, she mentioned that since her diagnosis, her relationship with alcohol had changed entirely, that she had become far more conscious of what she puts into her body and far more intentional about the choices she makes around her health and well-being. For a royal family that has spent centuries attending state banquets, diplomatic receptions, and ceremonial events where champagne and wine flow freely, this was a quietly radical statement. Her connection to nature became a central thread in her public narrative during this period. Catherine launched what she called the Mother Nature video series in 2025, a creative project that was deeply personal and deliberately unlike anything the palace's communications team would typically produce. The videos were reflective, almost meditative in their tone. They spoke about the healing power of natural environments, of early morning walks, of the simple and profound comfort that the outdoors had provided during the most difficult months of her treatment and recovery. On her 44th birthday in January 2026, she shared the final installment of the series, writing in her own words about the experience of creating it and what she hoped it would offer to others who were navigating their own journeys through illness, grief, or simply the ordinary but still difficult challenges of modern life. The signature at the end of the post, a simple C, became something of a symbol in itself. It meant she had written those words herself. No communications team, no palace spokesperson, no managed statement. Just Catherine. For several years, William and Catherine handled the growing controversy surrounding Prince Andrew with a strategy that was, in many ways, entirely understandable: silence and distance. They made no public statements, attended no events alongside Andrew, and allowed the palace's institutional machinery to manage the situation as it saw fit. For a couple deeply committed to protecting their own reputation and the credibility of their future reign, getting drawn into Andrew's increasingly toxic orbit carried obvious risks. But in early 2026, that strategy became impossible to maintain. The United States Justice Department released an enormous volume of previously sealed documents related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The documents ran to millions of pages and contained detailed information about Andrew's relationship with Epstein that was both extensive and deeply damaging. The scale and specificity of what was revealed made neutral silence no longer viable as a position. Kensington Palace released a statement confirming that William and Catherine were deeply troubled by the ongoing revelations, and that their thoughts and sympathies remained firmly with the victims. It was the first time the couple had directly and publicly addressed the Epstein scandal, and the timing and framing of the statement were clearly not accidental. The statement was released during William's official visit to Saudi Arabia, which communicated something important. This was not a panicked reaction to breaking news, but a deliberate, considered public positioning. The palace was making clear that William and Catherine had thought carefully about what they needed to say, when to say it, and what it needed to mean. They were drawing a clear line, not just for the public, but for the institution itself, between the future reign they intend to lead and the failures of the past that have damaged the monarchy's credibility. The personal dimension of this, for William, cannot be overstated. People who know him well and who have followed his relationship with Andrew over many years describe a Prince of Wales who has been deeply frustrated by the institution's reluctance to act decisively on this matter. William understands, with a clarity that comes from having spent his entire adult life thinking about the monarchy's future, that public trust is not a renewable resource. It cannot be spent recklessly and then replenished through a well-crafted statement. It has to be protected consistently and seriously by the choices the institution makes about who it stands with and who it distances itself from. The removal of Andrew's royal titles by King Charles and the requirement that Andrew vacate Royal Lodge were steps that aligned with the direction William had reportedly been advocating for behind palace walls. For the first time in this particular chapter of royal history, the public positioning and the private advocacy appeared to be moving in the same direction. If you had described 5 years ago the social media strategy that William and Catherine would be running by 2026, most royal observers would have been deeply skeptical. This was a couple whose approach to public communication had always been characterized by restraint, formality, and a clear preference for managed distance over digital intimacy. The transformation that has taken place is genuinely striking. Their New Year post at the start of 2026, 12 photographs chosen personally to represent the previous year, generated engagement figures that dwarfed those of almost every other royal social media post in recent memory. The post received over 300,000 likes, a number that represented roughly 3 times the engagement achieved by King Charles and Queen Camilla's equivalent post. In the competitive, attention-driven landscape of social media, those numbers tell a significant story. But the numbers, impressive as they are almost secondary to the choices that produce them. The photographs William and Catherine selected for that post were not the kind of images a palace communications team would have chosen. They were personal. They were unpolished, in the particular way that genuine moments always are. They reflected a year that had been difficult and complicated and ultimately triumphant in ways that had nothing to do with state visits or official engagements. Notably, only one image featured their children. This was a deliberate choice that speaks directly to the balance William and Catherine are trying to maintain, open enough to connect genuinely with a public that values authenticity, but protective enough to preserve for their children the privacy that William himself was never afforded, and that he has spoken movingly about valuing so deeply. The posts that Catherine has written herself, identifiable by that simple C signature, carry a quality that no public relations professional could replicate, because they carry the particular honesty of someone writing directly from their own experience without the buffer of institutional management. Her brother James Middleton, speaking publicly about his sister, described her as exactly the same person she has always been, grounded, genuine, and entirely herself regardless of the context or the audience. That quality, visible in her personal writing, is what people respond to. William's own social media voice has shifted in parallel. Where he once communicated almost exclusively through formal statements about official engagements, he now speaks about his work with the evident personal investment of someone who genuinely believes in what he is doing, not someone who is professionally obligated to appear enthusiastic about it. The difference is detectable, and audiences detect it immediately. What is perhaps most striking about William and Catherine in 2026, more than the personal revelations and the social media transformation and the willingness to speak about subjects they once handled with deliberate silence, is the sheer ambition and seriousness of the institutional work they are doing in preparation for a reign that is not yet upon them, but is clearly always in their minds. The Royal Foundation, which serves as the primary vehicle for their charitable and advocacy work, raised over £12 million in 2024 alone, a figure representing a 53% increase in income compared to the previous year. The American chapter of the foundation contributed substantially to that total, reflecting William and Catherine's deliberate effort to build meaningful international networks that will serve both their philanthropic goals and, eventually, their royal duties on a global stage. The Earthshot Prize, William's flagship environmental initiative, raised nearly £24 million in the year ending March 2025. This is not a vanity project attached to a royal title. It is a serious, globally recognized effort to identify and scale innovative solutions to the planet's most pressing environmental challenges, and it has established William as a credible and substantive figure in international conversations about climate and sustainability in a way that no amount of official speechmaking could have achieved. Their portfolio of causes, spanning mental health advocacy, early childhood development research, homelessness, ocean conservation, support for wildlife rangers in conflict zones, and access programs bringing swimming lessons to children from underprivileged backgrounds, reflects a breadth of genuine commitment that has been built over years of consistent engagement rather than assembled quickly for public relations purposes. The decision to begin granting royal warrants in 2026 represents a formal and significant expansion of William and Catherine's institutional authority. Royal warrants, which allow businesses to officially display royal endorsement, have historically been granted only by the monarch and the most senior members of the royal family. The extension of this privilege to William and Catherine signals clearly where the institutional center of gravity is moving. A palace source speaking to journalists described plans for the couple to hold at least one major event every month throughout 2026, each one focused on celebrating British businesses, community leaders, and individuals who are doing exceptional work in their fields. The explicit focus on showcasing the best of Britain is not accidental. It is the language of a future king and queen who are already thinking about the kind of reign they want to lead and the kind of country they want to represent. For most of George, Charlotte, and Louis's childhoods, their parents maintained a very clear and deliberate boundary between their children's lives and the public's curiosity about them. The children appeared at carefully selected occasions, the great ceremonial set pieces of the royal calendar, a handful of school events, the occasional carefully managed photograph released for a birthday. Then they retreated behind the gates of Adelaide Cottage in Windsor, and the world was expected to respect that boundary. In 2025 and into 2026, that boundary has begun, gradually and thoughtfully, to shift. The shift is not careless or driven by a change in philosophy about privacy. William and Catherine's commitment to protecting their children remains deeply genuine and clearly visible in the choices they continue to make. But they are recognizing that George, Charlotte, and Louis are growing up. And that part of growing up in this family means beginning slowly and carefully to take on the visibility that their eventual roles will require. The image of William and Charlotte at the UEFA Women's Euro 2025 final, sitting together in the stands, reacting to the action on the pitch with visible excitement and joy, presenting medals to the players at the end of the match, was striking in its ordinariness. These were not a prince and princess performing their duties. These were a father and his daughter watching a football match and enjoying it together, and the genuine warmth between them was unmistakable and entirely impossible to manufacture. George, now approaching 13 years old and preparing for the transition to secondary school that will represent one of the most significant changes of his life to date, has been introduced to public life with great care. The references to him in William and Catherine's annual posts and the occasional carefully chosen public interactions have been calibrated to begin building a public familiarity with the boy who will one day be king without exposing him to the kind of intense and potentially damaging scrutiny that William himself experienced at the same age. William has spoken with unmistakable personal feeling about what growing up in the public eye did to him, the loss of privacy, the loss of ordinary childhood experiences, the weight of public expectation at an age when no child should be carrying anything heavier than their school bag. The commitment he and Catherine have made to giving their children something closer to a normal childhood before the crown descends upon their lives is one of the most deeply held and consistently maintained positions this couple has ever taken. Perhaps the most profound of all the revelations that have emerged from this period of transparency is the one about the marriage itself. For many years, William and Catherine presented to the world a relationship that was, frankly, almost too perfect. The commoner girl who had captured a future king's heart. The couple who had weathered a brief separation in their university years and emerged stronger for it. The wedding that the entire world watched. The children who arrived and completed the picture. It was a beautiful story, but it was also, in its perfectly curated perfection, a story that felt slightly unreal. Because real marriages, even the very best ones, do not look like that from the inside. Real marriages have fear and exhaustion and misunderstanding and the difficult, daily work of choosing each other again and again in the face of everything that life throws at two people trying to build something together. What the past 2 years have revealed is that William and Catherine's marriage has always been something more complicated and therefore more genuinely admirable than the fairy tale version suggested. They have been through something truly frightening together. A serious illness in the family. The brutal physical and emotional demands of cancer treatment and recovery. The challenge of protecting and supporting their children through a period of profound uncertainty. The weight of doing all of this while knowing that an entire country and much of the world was watching and speculating. And they went through it together. William drove the children to school. He was present during hospital visits. He restructured his life around what his family needed rather than what the institution required. Catherine found new ways to express herself creatively and discovered sources of strength and healing she had not previously known she possessed. They built, in the crucible of a genuinely terrible year, a new version of their partnership, one that is quieter and perhaps less visually dazzling than the fairy tale, but infinitely more real and therefore infinitely more meaningful. By 2026, what the world can see in William and Catherine, when they appear together in public, when they speak about their work, when Catherine signs a personal post with a simple C, is not the performance of a royal marriage. It is the reality of two people who have been shaped by difficulty and chosen, consciously and repeatedly, to face that difficulty together rather than behind the managed silence that royal tradition would once have demanded of them.